Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. Call this meeting, regular meeting, May 22nd order. We have a quorum present. Is Melissa here? And did she get the document?
She got the document I'm sending now from Greg,
Thank you.
or at least she's on the list.
Okay, so we have Gray and Tom here.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't see everybody?
Okay, yes, sir. Go ahead and approval of the minutes. Special meeting, May 8th.
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Blanton, aye.
Brown, aye.
Daily, aye.
Melissa, you're on mute. You're still on mute. Harold, aye.
Motion is approved.
Ed, if I might interrupt for just a moment, could we go back to number 2 and make a motion to adopt the agenda for today?
Motion to adopt the agenda. We will rearrange the agenda since Jory is not here, but with it being rearranged.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call.
Blanton, aye.
Brown, aye.
Daily, aye.
Gordon, aye.
We will go to the Assets Committee instead of the Finance Committee for a report.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a report to deliver this week.
Okay,
This month.
so it will all be closed session, the document.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. County Administrator's report.
I don't believe Doug has won the line, has he yet?
Okay,
No.
Mr. Stanley's not on the line. Under Director Reports, I see Mr. Brown and the Advisory Committee.
Yeah, I've got several things just to briefly go over. First, the advisory committees. If you can send me today people that you think that would work well in these advisory committees. The design of them is not not to pass anything, but to open up a dialogue with our large businesses, small businesses, tourism businesses, and our banks, so that we can begin to chart a course forward in economic recovery. It's going to be a back and forth thing. It's going to be informal. The thought is to ask them to meet once a month virtually and have a discussion on what we're doing, what they're doing, what we all see is going on, and how we can make the county's economic recovery faster and stronger. So if you could send those to me today, then I can start calling and we can start setting those up. The second thing that I wanted to just throw out there, the county and town hope to be getting, I think, well, it's $2.5 million in grant money from the CARES Act. Some of that may go to EDA to support local businesses. And what I wanted to do was to see if, rather than reinventing the wheel, if the loan committee might be tasked or asked and tasked to administer these loan approval process. Jim Wolf was present when I heard about it, and he seemed enthusiastic about it. But it would be an expansion of what we do. I've had asked Sharon just to get her sense of it, and she thought that it would be fine doing that. Sharon, if you have anything, speak on up here at this point.
No, I absolutely. I think there may be a few different criteria, but certainly using the loan committee and having the EDA be a channel for these funds and vetting the those who might obtain the loans is fine. If the EDA, and Jeff and I talked about this, Jeff, if the EDA were only through the loan committee to vet the potential borrowers and not actually be the pass-through for the money, then I think it would be useful to get essentially a hold harmless from the county or the other public body that's actually going to make the loans. As I understand it, the current contemplation is not that the loans would be made through another private entity, which creates some complications.
Okay, so it's certainly doable. Obviously, we want to cross our T's, dot our I's, and make sure that when the loan committee that's A, functioning properly, and B, that when they're contemplating making loan decisions, that they have the correct criteria in front of them and are checking the boxes on it. But one of the things that I've liked about watching the loan committee get put together is they're paying a lot of attention to how it's being done, and I think we have a stellar group involved in it. I don't know that it requires a vote, but I wanted to certainly get your thoughts as to whether or not we can enlarge this. The thinking behind it is that this is going to be one of the best opportunities to provide help to local businesses quickly, directly, and gives us some modicum of control over who gets it, and to make sure that it goes to the right kinds of businesses that we can really help. And that's going to help the economic recovery of the county and the town. So that's my pitch for it. But let me know if you have thoughts on it and if you think it's a good idea.
Can I
Hey, Jeff,
interject just a second on that?
Please.
The board has to make the decision that it would go through the EDA if and when that it was. And we understand completely that the vetting process will be, from the EDA will have to be modified. When we get dollars in hand, it makes it easier to help everybody understand what we've got going and how we're gonna put it together. Because thoughts are just starting to roll around on how much the town is going to get, how much the county is going to get, that type of stuff, and how the money is going to be dispersed. The county is ultimately responsible for the dollars. So the question would be, like Sharon said, if we decide to allow anybody to have a grant or monies or whatever, how you want to call it, we've got to make sure that it goes directly to that process, and to that purpose that they're going in, and it's associated with the COVID-19 program. Because if it isn't, and it's proven that it isn't, the county is going to be responsible for that money to pay them back. We're going to have our I's dotted and T's crossed just to make sure. And again, I have to say, the board is going to have to make the decision on how we're going to disperse the funds. The question came out to Jeff and Ed that we just want to give them the opportunity, because they're so involved in the community economic development, that if we're going to give away funds, the EDA should be at least considered. But again, that decision isn't ultimately made yet. When I get dollars in hand, it'll be a little bit different.
And what I was just trying to do here was to make sure that we didn't have roadblocks on our end to make that happen. I understand that you guys haven't made your decisions yet, but I wanted to be sure we were standing ready in case you decided to provide EDA with some of those funds to disperse.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jeff.
Mr. Chairman, if I might interject one other thing, as I think Chairman May probably already is aware of, there are some models out there already among local governments in Virginia with respect to criteria and putting some guidelines into place, guidelines or restrictions. A couple of the larger localities have already done it. Some smaller ones have as well. And I'd be glad to work with your county attorney, Jason, or to see if you don't have to reinvent the wheel on
Right.
some of those aspects.
Thank you, Sharon. Appreciate that. I'm sure that we'll have you and Mr. Ham talking a lot about that once the decision is made.
Sure.
Thank you.
So my idea, I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Thank you. Jeff, and maybe Chairman Mabe, the funding that's coming in from the feds for this, is it paid back to the feds, or is it a grant to the locality for us to manage, or is that ultimately paid back to the federal government?
Walt's probably in the best position to say, but I think it's a block grant, is it not?
That's the way that I understand it. We have applied for it. I'm not telling anything out of school. Obviously, everybody seems to know about it, but we're going to be getting the dollars. The application process has been sent out. We have some guidelines. As soon as I get those cleared up, I'll be dispersing them to Mr. Brown and to Mr. Daly, and probably to Sharon too. I would think it would ultimately get to her to make sure that everybody is talking about the same thing. And the decision to do this will ultimately again come from the board. And I think it's a positive approach because we need to do that. But it does not look like the money is going to have to be repaid. It does look like a block grant. The county would just ultimately be responsible, and we've got to make absolutely sure that it goes to where it's supposed to go.
If it's a block grant and the money is being loaned to businesses, that means that money is coming back. So basically, the county has almost turned into a de facto lending institution that would technically continue in perpetuity until the money is completely exhausted or it's lost or whatever the case may be.
I do believe that. Yeah, I'm sorry, Greg. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I do believe there's going to be a time limit on it, and I believe that it's more of a grant to us than a grant that we can place out to individuals or companies that need it for economic development or support and help during this crisis.
So it's not necessarily a loan.
No, it's not necessarily a loan. It is a grant.
Thank you.
This is a grant, but all the money that's being thrown out across the beltway around the country will have to be repaid by the taxpayers at some point.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
I envision this that right now the committee has the SBA criteria over here, and they're allowed to apply this way, and this fits and that doesn't, etc. And then if the county board approved this and set it up and asked us to be their agent, is what we would be, then the committee would also have this pile over here that they could look at, and they would have criteria for that and what could go and how much of it is loan and how much of it is grant, etc., would remain when we get the final criteria. And it may give the county a lot of flexibility on how they set it up and how they do this, so that we would be their agent and we would just follow their guidelines. And it's another tool, if you will, in the basket that the loan committee could use to help our local businesses. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, good. Any other comments? I just wanted to raise it, possibly prematurely, but also with the thought that if we get it, we're going to want to move fast and make sure that we're headed in the right direction.
So if we do that, everybody's aware of it, that it's on the radar in there.
Yeah. Doug Parsons? Yeah.
I don't want to take a lot of time. I just wanted to ask a quick question. Do you know whether or not it is strictly for the retention of existing businesses due to the COVID crisis, or could we possibly use it for new prospect activity if we have a deal and need a little bit of gap financing? Can it be used for stuff like that, or is it more limited to just assistance for existing businesses?
It could be used in many different areas, and that's part of what I'm trying to get to Jeff and Mr. Daly, to make sure that everybody sees the different types of programs that we can actually apply that money to. It could be businesses, it could be individuals, it could be anything. We would be given the opportunity to share that with the town as well, and that separation hasn't been determined yet. I should be talking with the mayor and the town manager after discussing with Mr. Stanley and the board how we're gonna offer up the distribution of the funds. And again, the problem first that we've got to do is we've got to make sure that the money's in hand. We're going to disperse it correctly in the way that it's supposed to be dispersed. We're going to make sure that if and when we disperse it, we're going to have the ability to track which place that it's going all the time. And in turn, if we give X amount of dollars to the EDA, we're going to have to be able to track that as well. And we're going to have to vet people and or businesses as to what we're doing with. So yeah, there's a lot of things that still have to be uncovered, Doug.
Accountability will be everything.
Accountability will be everything. Because I'd hate to say if we gave X amount of dollars to the town and they did whatever they wanted, if they can't prove it, that it was going to the program or what the guidelines say, ultimately could come back on the county, and we're not going to have that. Total class transparency or clarity has to be maintained.
Well, there would need to be a process that, number one, all of the disbursements come from the county.
That's correct.
We don't have any money out at 400 Kendrick Lane.
That's correct.
And number two, there would be a process where however you want to set it, where the board and supervisors and the county administration is notified of any actions taken to disperse any of the funds through the county treasurer and so forth.
That's
there would
correct.
be no money out here. And I think new business is actually the lowest priority for this, Doug. This is to help the existing businesses, people, not for a business attraction.
I realize that. I just thought, $2.5 million sounds like a good deal of money. I
don't think we would be getting it all to start with. So, but it potentially is something that we can work with and help a lot of existing businesses. And, there may be that odd circumstance where a business coming in can we can help them make the decision to come here with some help. So
yeah, I realize it's the existing businesses that's the primary.
I think by next meeting we should have the ability to. I can throw out there what I know as is going to happen and what the requirements are and what type of businesses or individuals that we could actually give money to. So I'll be able to lay it out a little better. This, from the way that I understand it, this is just the thought processes right now. The application has been requested, and soon as we get it in hand and the full requirements of and processes that we have to go through, I'll share that with the group. And by that time, hopefully, we'll be able to have a decision on how much is going to the county, how much is going to the town, and how we want to disperse and to whom.
Thank you. Anyone else? I do want to give an opportunity for the town manager report. If anyone wants to present one. All right, we'll move on to the executive director report.
Okay. So under financial management, of course, we've selected Brown Edwards and we're off and running with them. They provided us with a list of the records that they'll need. And Carolyn and Gretchen have been working on that in our boardroom. They've got a bunch of those documents laid out already. I think they've got a little ways to go, but Carolyn and Gretchen are working really hard to get those gathered. We've also reached out, or rather Chris Banta with Brown Edwards has reached out to Yount, Hyde and Barber to see if there's any documents or anything that they have that would be of help. I reached out to Chris Banta to see if he's gotten a response from them, and he hasn't. I haven't heard back from Chris yet. So I'll keep reaching out to him to see where that process stands. Under coronavirus business assistance, the USDA loan committee is set. Thanks so much to Sharon, Jim Wolf, everybody that worked on this, Greg, the whole board pretty much had a lot of input on this thing, and the loan committee also. And I think we've got a really good program. I think we've got our processes nailed down well. We finalized the application. We sent out a press release a couple of days ago. We already have 3 people that are interested. I'm going to meet with one of them later today and go over the application process with them. So I'm excited to get this off the ground. Under WCEDA owned properties, 514 East Main Street, we're set to go. We're looking at a closing for May the 29th. So this time next week, hopefully we'll have this thing, have the apartment sold, and we'll be able to pay off one of our loans if this goes through. The loan on the apartments and the market, which has been previously sold, is down to a balance of $118,966.63. So at a sale price of $127,500, we should be able to have some extra to put toward the combined loan and get that paid down a little bit more. On some of our other properties, I wanted to publicly thank, I should have done this at the board meeting last month, but I wanted to publicly thank the Warren County Department of Parks and Recreation's maintenance staff for the hard work they've done out at Stevens and Happy Creek parks. They've cleared a lot of brush that allows people to see back into the land and see how it lays and get a feel for what the property looks like. And they've also cleared some brush away from our Ball Drive building out there so you can see the building a little bit better. So I just want to thank them for all the hard work there, and then also for the mowing and trimming they do, which is, I'm sure, a perpetual exercise throughout the summer. Prospect activity continues to be good. We have a few to talk about in closed session. I can say that we've been working with FMC Corporation and the US EPA to determine a sale price out on the Avtex property, as we've had several interested parties out there. And they have asked us to obtain an appraisal on that property to help them determine a price. So that's something we'll have to take a look at. If the board would like, I could get some quotes from some appraisers on how much they would charge to give us an appraisal for the Avtex site. It's my understanding that we may recoup those costs when the property sells. That would be a closing cost or a cost involved with the sale that we would be eligible for reimbursement for when that property does sell. So I can talk a little bit more in closed session about some of the prospects that we have that we're currently in negotiations with. On the Business Ready Sites program, I've been working with Jay Langston at the Shenandoah Valley Partnership and the Go Virginia Region 8 team to pursue funding to complete some of the due diligence work that we need on our sites to increase their tier ranking. Stevens and Happy Creek have some of the work needed, such as the geotech. And in the case of Happy Creek, we've got a very fresh phase 1 environmental and a traffic study that are 2 of the components that they're looking for there. But there's quite a bit of expense involved in the ALTA survey and the topo and boundary surveys and some of the archaeological and rare, threatened, and endangered species studies. So hopefully we can get some grant funding. The money that we spent on the rezoning application bolsters our application for some of these funds. So hopefully that'll get us across the line, and we'll get some funding there. Under collaborative efforts, I mentioned that our efforts with the Northern Shenandoah Valley Regional Council for grant funds for the Startup Shenandoah Valley program. That application's made it over the first hurdle. It's been approved by the Go Virginia Region 8 Council, and it's now at the State Department of Community and Housing Development for their review, I believe today, and then it would go to the State Go Virginia Board for final approval. Beach Run Parkway, we're down to just a few items. The DEQ, we were pleasantly surprised they were able to come up in person, and we're able to review the property with Carl Schaefer at Pannoni, folks from the town and the county, and you can see the observations and the recommended corrective actions there in my report. So I'll be working with Carl, who will be working with Branch Civil to hopefully get this thing closed out here. It's just a few items left, so I'm ever optimistic about getting that done.
Just so I know where I am out there, is Pond 2 the one by John Marshall, sir?
Yes, I believe so. That's where most of the concern has been as it relates to some erosion. There's a drain, a stormwater pipe coming underneath of John Marshall that comes into the pond, but when it rains really heavily, there's quite a bit of discharge there, and it's in the past it's eroded that area out, and it's been filling the pond with a little bit of silt. It's my understanding that riprap was not an option, so we need to get sod established there and in that little swale, and so that's something I think they've historically struggled with, but they're trying to get sod established there versus trying to get grass seed established, which takes a lot longer and is a lot more fragile, so to speak. So, that's the area, though, Ed.
Thank you. Does anyone object to Doug getting 3 quotes for appraisals at the Avtex property?
I think it's a great idea.
Do it.
So hearing none, go ahead and do that, please, Doug.
Will do.
Anything else for Doug?
No, Doug Stanley is here, by the way, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
For Doug Parsons, Mr. Chairman, when if we can talk about for appraisals, we also have that other appraisal that we might need over there on Happy Creek. Is that correct, Doug?
We do, and I'm glad I think we could discuss the appraisal process a little bit enclosed as it relates to some of our other items, if that's okay.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we have a pulse on that. So
absolutely, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the county administrator.
Good morning, Ed. Good morning, board members.
Good morning.
I didn't know if you had already, I was trying to time this out well, and I obviously missed by one person, but my report's in the packet. I didn't know if you had any questions. Obviously, dealing with coronavirus stuff right now. Economic development wise, of course, the Sheets project is moving along, and the multi-tenant building at Riverton Commons, they're going through inspections for the foundation, and the Equus Warehouse has submitted all their site plans, so that's working its way through the process, and they're working with DEQ on their DEQ permit. But that's the major thing. The other piece was the tourism committee did presentations to both town council and the board on moving forward with tourism, and I'm hoping in the not too distant future that we can get county and town reps, in addition to the joint tourism committee, to discuss and make a final recommendation to the board and council on moving forward with that.
If there's a role that the community would like the EDA to play in the new tourism process, we're available.
One of the options being discussed is really to have like a third-party vendor take it over, and whether that's the chamber, it could have been the EDA, it could be a private organization. So I would think maybe even the EDA and chamber want to talk to see what does that look like moving forward, if that's an option. But certainly other EDA, Shenandoah County right next door, their EDA director also handles tourism. So there's certainly some cross-pollination there between those two, work areas. So it may be worth having Doug in that discussion.
I think tourism is part of economic development in Frederick and Winchester also.
Okay.
Both of them. You had mentioned that you have received audit proposals, and there was the question about the participation of the EDA in that.
So, obviously we were discussing earlier in the last year, does the EDA become a county department? And about January, February, we were putting the RFP together. I went ahead and included the EDA concept as part of that discussion. We received 3 quotes. We interviewed 2 of the firms. We ended up going back with Robinson, Farmer, and Cox. We did get them to switch up offices, so we'll have a different lead auditor to get a different set of eyes on the county's books. But they gave us some pretty good pricing. The first year is $15,000, I believe. The second year was $15,450 or so for the EDA, and then it was a number closer to $16,000 for year 3. But the way it's structured, I can include it in our contract with the EDA and have it included, and I can sign off on that. I can have them give y'all a separate contract. The reality is, the board's going to revisit the discussion about the EDA and audits anyway, but while we were putting the RFP out, I figured from the standpoint of getting bids and really getting better pricing because you were tied to us, and I think that has happened, that economies of scales would come to play here, and we would get a better cost for your audit. So I just need direction. Do I include kind of you with us? I mean, we're paying the operating funding anyway, and you're part of the, we're your fiscal agent. Do you want me to include the FY20 EDA audit as part of my contract? Do you want to have a separate contract? Or do you want to try to do something completely separate altogether? And there's no skin off my back. I'm trying to help you guys out any way I can and make it as easy as possible.
Well, it makes sense that all the records are in the county admin building, that just about 98% of what they have to do is going to be down there.
They can do the field work at the same time they're doing our field work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you don't have 2 sets of auditors being in each other's way, if you will, down in the county office building. How does the board feel about this? We were going to discuss this in finance, and we got so busy we did not get to it.
I would vote combined with the county. Makes sense. Anybody see what the fallacy in that is? I don't.
Anyone else?
I think it's a good idea if we can save money. It puts us in line with the county, and I think it's probably a good, healthy move.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Greg?
Is there any conflict with that and EDA managed county properties or projects that would create an issue?
I guess that's a Sharon question. I don't know of one.
I'm not immediately thinking that there is one. I mean, the concept presumes that the county has a confidence level that this is not going to be an issue. Excuse me.
And they were separate sections, but Winchester and Frederick both included the EDA in their audits. And so there was one auditor.
I just want to sort of understand this a little bit more, just so we're all clear. Is it one auditor and one audit, or is it one auditor, same auditor, doing two separate audits?
So both firms, Sharon, that we interviewed, we had quite a discussion, and Carolyn was part of that. They really wanted to wait and see whether it was really two separate documents or if the EDA piece would be part of our audit, kind of like the schools is as a component unit. I personally would say, if possible, let's have it as a separate actual document so that you get it and you see it and it's yours and just your stuff included. But I think there's going to be some accounting that's going to come into play as to whether they're going to say no, because we're the fiscal agent and because we're the primary funder, they're going to either include it or not include it based on accounting rules, not what Doug wants. But I would rather it be a separate standalone document if it works that way.
But in any event, it's going to be if it's not a separate document, it would at least be a separate section.
Absolutely.
Would be a separate component if it's not a separate document.
That's correct.
Sharon, are there any legal requirements we need to be considering?
Well, you're going to have to, you do have to be able to submit this audit to the state auditor. So, but that's true of the county as well. I don't see that as a sort of big issue. There may be issues that come up as we go along, but at least at this point, you've had a relationship with the county that's been more than transparent over the recent year, and so I would think that the auditors have some clarity as to whether there are problems right at this moment. You definitely are going to need a separate section, even if it's not a separate document, because I don't think every time you go out to engage with a bank or with somebody else where the county may not be involved, that other entity's going to want to have to go through the whole county audit to get to the EDA. So a separate section is going to be important. And I would assume the auditor is going to do that anyway. It just makes practical sense.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else on the audit? So we'll let Mr. Stanley to please go ahead and proceed with including us, and we'll see how it shakes out.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I'm impressed with the fact that you had a 10% increase in sales tax in March. That's awesome.
That's good news. I firmly, we've been talking about this quite a bit, but rural Warren County, our economy, I think is, a lot of the staple goods. It's people going to Walmart and Lowe's and Target and the hardware stores, things like that. We don't have a lot of luxury items, so I still see people packing stores. So my hope is that April is going to be the bellwether because that's the first full month of the COVID-19 impact. My hope is that we have a strong April and the numbers will hold up. And if we do, we should be in pretty good shape for the current fiscal year's budget.
Yes, that was very positive. I know that Big Lots is open now. Any estimate for Harbor Freight?
We haven't heard anything, but I would think it'd be in the next few months. They've been certainly talking about it for a while.
Do we want to get it before everybody spends all their stimulus checks?
Exactly.
Anything else for Mr. Stanley?
Yeah. No, but can I ask a question?
Please.
I was on mute when you're talking about the grant and the grants. And my question is, are the same criteria going to be there for the grants as for the SBA loans? And if that's the case, until the money runs out, who in their right mind would not be applying for the grant and in lieu of the SBA loans? Are we going to put those people out of business as far as the looking at the applications, or are there going to be different criteria? I just had that as a question.
I don't think the criteria is completely set yet on what are going to be the rules for the grants and the new money, COVID money. And so I envision that our loan committee is going to have the SBA requirements over here, and you're eligible for 1, 2, or 3 different programs. And then they're going to have the COVID money over here, and that criteria will be similar but different. And there'll be some criteria here where somebody can come over here and they can't come over here, or they can come over here but they can't come over here. And we'll have to wait and see how that plays. But I think the COVID money will go first as much as possible, as you say.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Mr. Chairman, if I might set forth the items for closed meeting. There are 2 matters relating to disposition of real property, 2 East Main, Afton Inn, and 514 East Main. There are 4 matters relating to discussion of prospective business or industry where no announcement has been made. 426 Bow Drive, Happy Creek Industrial Park, Avtex/Royal Phoenix, and Stevens Industrial Park. There's 1 matter relating to consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual litigation, Town of Front Royal versus IDA, and 1 matter related to consultation with legal counsel relating to First Bank and Trust. Those are pursuant to Virginia Code Sections 2.2-3711A3, 5, 7, and 8. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I add one additional topic to item number 4? Is the small business loan program. We have one issue to discuss in closed, and that's 2.2-3711A8.
So we will add that item. Is there a motion?
As amended, I so move.
Second.
Roll call.
Blanton, aye.
Brown, aye.
Daly, aye.
Gordon, aye.
Harold, aye.
Patterson, aye.
We are in closed session.